The midnight chime sounded as I hurriedly fled the ballroom. Behind me, someone picked up the high heel I had dropped on the staircase. But he didn't know, I had left it there on purpose. Chapter 1. The next time I saw Natalie, a question I'd once come across on Quora came to mind. What happened to all those bullies in the end? She was sitting in the passenger seat of a Rolls-Royce, an Hermes bag worth tens of thousands slung over her shoulder, beside a young man radiating an air of confidence. She looked like she was doing incredibly well. The Rolls-Royce sped off, leaving me standing there, in the height of August's heat, yet feeling like I'd been plunged into an icy abyss. The screams, the cries of despair, the past came crashing over me like waves, flooding my mind, and suddenly I was gasping, gripping a bus stop sign as I crouched down, cold sweat dripping onto the pavement, only to be quickly evaporated by the scorching sun. Shattered memories raced through my mind, pulling me back 10 years, back to those gray days of adolescence. I spent all 3 years of high school in the shadow of whispering rumors. A relentless stream of degrading posts about me dominated the school's message board, all authored by Natalie. She would swear she had seen me with countless men, that I'd gone to the hospital for some unspeakable reason. I was cornered in bathrooms, alleyways, rooftops. Girls would whisper about me, afraid my disease might somehow infect them. Boys would hurl the most vile insults, their gazes filled with malicious curiosity. One day, she even had a group of rough girls strip me down, photograph me, and plaster the photos everywhere in our neighborhood. My father, feeling humiliated by the scandal, left my mom and me after their divorce, abandoning us both. And it all started because the boy Natalie had a crush on once wrote me a love letter. The day she found that letter was the day my personal hell began. She unleashed the most terrifying malice upon me. The only reason I survived was my desperate hope to escape by going to college and leaving that place behind. But on the day before the college entrance exams, Natalie locked me in the bathroom. I screamed, but no one could hear me. And in that dark despair, I heard the sound of the next morning's bell. It was the bell signaling the start of the exams. In a last grasp at freedom, I jumped from the 3rd floor. I shattered my leg, was rushed to the hospital, and missed the exams. Meanwhile, my mother, facing constant gossip and witnessing my ruined future, fell into deep depression and eventually took her own life. In one night, I lost everything. My life was destroyed. Yet the person who caused it all simply left with her wealthy father to study abroad, saying goodbye to everything here. She suffered no consequences, cheerfully sharing her daily life abroad and becoming a minor internet celebrity. She even posted vlogs on how to live as a confident, happy person. Natalie was indeed confident and happy, her pretty face beaming as she surfed across the waves in her videos. Her fans praised her, envied her, telling her she was who they aspired to be. But only I knew the truth. She wasn't like that. She had destroyed me. If there is a hell on earth, she is its demon. I don't remember how I made it home that day. I just know that when I got there, I was drenched in cold sweat. I thought to myself, why does she get to live so well? How can she still be so happy, so joyful, after ruining someone else's life? Is this fair? Outside, the night was pitch black. Not a single star was visible. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling until tears, stinging from exhaustion, slipped down my cheeks. If fate won't punish her, then maybe I will. Chapter 2. It didn't take long to get an idea of Natalie's current situation. She wasn't doing as well as I'd initially thought. By the time she graduated college, her father's business was already struggling financially. She had to drop out of grad school and return home, where her father arranged a marriage with a genuinely wealthy heir. That was the man I had seen with her in the car, Richard, the only son of the chairman of Penguin Group. Apparently, the Hahn family was hoping Penguin Group would provide financial support, which is why they were rushing the two into marriage. I spent a month studying Richard, and he wasn't at all what I'd expected from a spoiled rich playboy. In fact, his lifestyle could almost be described as clean. He had no scandals to his name, and his favorite activity wasn't clubbing, chasing women, or racing cars, but playing basketball at a $20 an hour gym with college students. I didn't know what was going on in Richard's mind, but Natalie seemed genuinely smitten with him. Through a lot of digging, I managed to find her secret social media account. It was filled with posts about her and Richard. Every update involving him was documented with an undeniable affection. Looking at the photos of this handsome man with a hint of rebellious charm in his gaze, I knew where I could begin. Richard had a strict routine. Every day was the same: work, go home, with occasional trips to the basketball court. Once I had his schedule down, I adopted a stray kitten online and planned my timing carefully. Holding the kitten, I waited on the sidewalk. As expected, it wasn't long before that familiar Rolls-Royce appeared on the street. Pretending not to notice it, I crouched down to examine the kitten, and as the car approached, I feigned a panicked stumble, falling to the ground with a painful scrape. The car paint gleamed under the sunset, reflecting a dark shine as Richard angrily stepped out, slamming the door shut. "Are you blind?" he started, but stopped when he saw me, panicked and apologetic, saying, "I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't mean to. I just saw a kitten on the road." I winced, shifting my knee slightly to reveal the little white kitten nestled in my arms. The kitten, wide-eyed and tiny, had left small paw prints on my white dress, its mewling filled with fright. Richard paused, swallowing whatever angry words he had left. I steadied myself to stand, and blood seeped through the scrape on my knee, a gory, pitiful sight. "I'm really sorry," I apologized softly. "I'll be on my way." I started limping toward the sidewalk without a second glance. 2, I counted in my head. Just as I reached 1, Richard called out, "Your knee is bleeding. Let me take you to the hospital." With my back to him, I allowed myself a smirk. I'd spent 3 months poring over Richard's public social media. 7 years ago, when he was studying in the UK, he had a little white stray cat. That cat had been his companion in a foreign country for 3 years, but it ran outside one day and was killed by a car when the housekeeper left the door open. Seeing a similar cat again, I knew it would make him remember. Turning to decline, I replied, "It's fine. It's just a scratch. I can walk back." "Stop wasting time," Richard muttered, glancing at the kitten in my arms. "Get in the car." Inside the car, I held the kitten close, awkwardly dabbing my injury with a tissue. Richard glanced at my knee, frowning slightly. "Let's go to the pet hospital first," I said softly, cradling the kitten. "I think it might have been hit by a car. Let's get your knee cleaned up first." Richard handed me an alcohol wipe. "Use this for the blood." Taking the wipe, I shook my head. "I'm fine. It's just a little scratch. Let's see to the kitten first. It's so tiny. Who knows what injuries it might have." Richard glanced at the kitten but didn't insist further. Parking at a nearby pet hospital, the vet thoroughly examined the kitten, took x-rays, then reassured me, "Nothing serious. Just a bit of stress, and it has some ear mites and minor skin issues. Typical of stray cats. I'll give you some medicine to take home." Sitting on the sofa, I stroked the kitten, my pale fingers brushing over its tiny head, and it quickly quieted down, purring softly in my lap. "Thank you. How much do I owe?" I took out my phone, only to find it had died. I bit my lip, embarrassed, and asked the vet, "Could I charge my phone here so I can pay?" Richard stepped forward and scanned the payment code, covering the bill without a second thought. I offered him an apologetic smile. "Thanks. Could you give me your contact info so I can pay you back?" "No need." Richard glanced at the sleeping kitten, a complex expression on his face. "I insist." I pressed, meeting his eyes. "You even brought me here. I can't let you cover my bill too. I really want to repay you." The afternoon sunlight poured through the pet hospital's glass window, casting a golden glow on the strands of chestnut brown hair falling over my shoulder. I knew my eyes looked clear and innocent in the sunlight. It had taken me hundreds of trials to find the most natural-looking lenses. A girl in a white dress with a white kitten, no man could resist. Sure enough, Richard hesitated, then scribbled a number on a piece of paper and handed it to me. I took it with a grateful smile. "Got it. Thanks again for today. I'll get my knee looked at myself. Don't let me hold you up." This time he didn't argue, glancing once more at the kitten before he walked out. He didn't see it the moment he turned his back. My smile vanished. Clutching the slip of paper, I held the now alert kitten tightly, my gaze fixed on Richard's retreating figure. Perfect. The prey had stepped into my territory. I wasn't going to let him go. Chapter 3. That night, after transferring Richard $850, I thanked him once more. Richard accepted the payment with a curt "hmm." I sent a quick emoji and ended the conversation. I couldn't say too much. With his status, he had no shortage of women throwing themselves at him. He'd seen every trick in the book. I couldn't let him sense my intentional approach. Lying in bed, I closed my eyes, thinking about our next meeting. Contrast creates allure, and for our next encounter, I'd need a different look. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Learning about an upcoming business banquet in the city, a gathering for all the top local executives, I treated the office to coffee. In just one cup, the one I gave to Mr. Lee's assistant, I slipped a harmless laxative often used for constipation. Its only drawback was a slightly delayed effect. As anticipated, by noon the next day, he was rushing to the bathroom repeatedly. She hadn't connected it to the iced Americano from yesterday, assuming it was something she'd eaten that morning. By the afternoon, she was practically collapsed in her chair, clutching her stomach. Mr. Lee fretted nearby. How will you manage tonight? I was counting on you to help me discuss the development project with Penguin. He waved a hand weakly, grimacing. Find someone else. I'd go if I could, but I don't think you want a scene. Not funny. Mr. Lee scowled, glancing up as I entered with a file in hand. I handed over the proposal. Mr. Lee, here's the plan for the garden development project. I printed 2 copies. His eyes lit up, pulling me over. Lisa, do you know this project well? Weren't you on the team during planning? Of course, I was. The moment I knew Penguin was involved, I made sure I was part of that team. Even if this banquet hadn't come up, I'd have found another way into any project involving Penguin. Before I could reply, he nodded. Yes, Lisa's been with us from the start. She's the perfect choice. The weekly teas I treated the office to were finally paying off. He knew I was only interested in business, not her position, so she gladly pushed me forward, seeing a lifeline. Mr. Lee's scowl softened as he shoved the file into my hands. I'm giving you half the day off. Go get a dress. On the company tab, looking down at the proposal, a smile tugged at my lips. Will do. Mr. Lee. Chapter 4. This banquet was packed with prominent business figures from the city and neighboring areas. Hosted at the most luxurious hotel in town, the grand ballroom was brightly lit. I double-checked my black gown before following my boss into the bustling crowd. I didn't need to search. My boss nodded discreetly toward Richard, whispering, that guy over there. Do you see him? Richard held a glass of wine, surrounded by people. At 6'3", he stood out among the crowd, and his face, radiant even beyond the lights, was unmistakable. I nodded. That's the heir of Penguin Group. The only son of Martin. He'll be in charge soon, as his father's already delegating responsibilities. We're here to get his attention. I'll start things off, and then you can introduce the project details. Memorized it all? I smiled. Don't worry, Mr. Lee. I've got it down. I had spent the entire week studying it. There was no way I could forget. Mr. Lee nodded in approval and led me toward Richard. Mr. Lee called out with a broad smile from a distance. Long time no see. Mr. You're looking as dashing as ever tonight. Richard smiled at him, but his gaze quickly landed on me. I paused, widening my eyes just slightly in a look of surprise. You, Richard's brow furrowed as he looked at me. You're the one from that day. I curved my lips in a polite smile. Good evening, Mr. He looked at me once more, as if he couldn't quite reconcile this woman in a black gown with red lips with the girl in the white dress holding a kitten. Mr. Lee glanced at me, surprised that we had already met, but quickly recovered and introduced me to Richard. Mr. This is Lisa from our company. She's also working on the suburban project. Quite a coincidence, actually. Richard raised his eyebrows, his deep, dark eyes scrutinizing me. The suburbs? You mean the garden project? Yes. Mr. Lee chuckled. Lisa, go ahead and fill Mr. in on our latest plans. Is this a good time, Mr. Richard's gaze drifted back to me before he gave a slight nod, pushing a strand of hair behind my ear. I let it rest against the pearl barrette that held back my dark hair. exposing my slender neck. Looking directly at Richard, I began presenting the project details I had meticulously memorized. The garden project is classified as Category B residential land, with a floor area ratio no greater than 1:8 and building density under 30%. We're also considering integrating a mall, schools, and a hospital in the vicinity to develop Penguin's first fully serviced residential complex. Mr. Lee nodded approvingly beside me, but soon another executive called him over. He leaned in close to whisper to me before leaving, "I have something to attend to. You continue briefing Mr. He. Just stick to the proposal." I nodded, smoothly outlining the vision for the garden project. At first, Richard seemed only mildly interested, but as I spoke, I noticed a spark of genuine curiosity in his eyes as he pondered the ideas. After nearly 20 minutes of discussion, I finished my last point, expecting Richard to have questions about the proposal, but instead, he caught me off guard with an entirely different question. "How's the kitten doing?" I blinked, caught off guard as my professional smile faded. After a moment, I smiled softly, looking up at him. "She's doing well. She's grown a lot. Would you like to see a picture, Mr. He?" For the first time, his usually stoic expression softened, and a barely there smile flickered across his face. "I'd like that." We stepped aside, and I reached into my black clutch, pulling out my phone with a cartoon case. Smiling sheepishly, I swiped to a video of the little white kitten. "Here," I said, my tone bright and casual. "She eats like a tiny bulldozer. I swear." In the video, the kitten was buried in her food bowl, chomping enthusiastically. "She's grown so much in just over a month." I gestured with my hand to show her current size and played another video. Richard watched intently, more absorbed than he had been with the project proposal. As he watched the kitten, a hint of nostalgia softened his gaze, and for the first time, he opened up. "I used to have a white kitten like this. Did it have a big appetite too?" I asked, feigning curiosity. Of course, I knew the answer. I had thoroughly researched every detail about his old cat on his social media. Each topic now was a carefully chosen opening. Richard nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting. "Yes, she was a big eater. Not picky at all. Very easy to care for. Mine is the opposite. She's picky. Only eats one brand of cat food and won't touch medicine, even if I hide the medicine in her food. She can tell." I sighed. "Mr. He, do you have any tricks for getting a cat to take medicine?" "Well," Richard's face lit up as he began explaining. "You could mix it with canned food or pretend to drop it on the floor. She'd probably eat it faster than anything." I laughed, genuinely amused this time. Richard was now talking to me casually. This encounter had gone exactly as planned. That evening, Mr. Lee still hadn't returned, and Richard and I spent the rest of the time swapping cat stories, never once returning to the proposal. He recommended several brands of cat food, and I pretended not to remember. So Richard offered to send me a list later. Our conversation flowed naturally, or at least it seemed that way to him, until midnight. I sent Mr. Lee a message, then reluctantly ended our chat. "I'm sorry, Mr. He, but I need to head back. The kitten's alone at home." Richard hesitated, then stood to walk me out. The night was cool and calm outside the brightly lit ballroom. As I descended the steps, my long dress caught, and my silver high heels slipped off onto the red carpet. In the dim light, my bare toes gleamed faintly pink. Blushing, I withdrew my foot but winced as I set it down. "Twisted your ankle?" His gaze lingered on my foot for a moment before he leaned down and, without hesitation, picked me up. "I'll take you home." I was about to decline, but he continued, "I didn't get to drive you last time. Don't refuse me again." With that, he carried me down the steps and placed me in his car. This time he was driving a different Rolls-Royce, still luxurious, but not the one from before. I noticed a pink air freshener hanging in the car. It had to be Natalie's. I could hardly contain my anticipation. Very soon, we would meet, and I was eager to see the look on her face. Richard drove me all the way to my apartment and even carried me upstairs. I didn't invite him inside, but I thanked him at the door. "Thank you so much for tonight. I'm just not used to wearing high heels," I said, smiling shyly. He glanced at my foot, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, He just nodded and left. I watched as the elevator carried him down, glancing down at the one remaining high heel on my foot. The silver heel sparkled, encrusted with tiny, glimmering gems that gleamed under the hallway light. Cinderella had successfully met her prince, and the other glass slipper was now left in his Rolls-Royce. Chapter 5. That night, I posted a short video on my social media. I wasn't going to reach out to Richard directly, too obvious, too needy, but I needed to keep his interest alive. In the video, I accidentally dropped a pill on the floor, and my round-eyed kitten darted over, snatching it up instantly. I made a show of trying to grab it from her, but she nibbled away and swallowed it before I could react. The video didn't show my face, only my cozy, well-kept apartment, with a fluffy cat bed and scratching post on the carpet, a casual, warm setting. 10 minutes later, Richard liked my post, sitting cross-legged on my bed. I smiled at the screen. Richard was interested. He wouldn't be viewing my posts otherwise. Maybe it was just mild interest or a budding sense of appreciation. But if I stoked the small flame, it would eventually grow into something much bigger. After years of surviving in a world brimming with hostility, I'd learned the art of manipulation. First, I made sure he noticed me. Then, I made him remember me. Now, I'd make him fall for me. I didn't need to take any action for a third encounter. My bait was already set. As expected, Richard contacted me the next evening. He sent a text, "Cinderella, you left your glass slipper with me." Attached was a picture of the silver high heel I'd left behind. I waited 10 minutes before replying. "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot it last night. When would be convenient for me to pick it up?" Richard replied with an address, his usual basketball court. "I've got a game there. If you're free, you can pick it up at Courtfire Basketball on Nanjing Road." I texted back, "Sure," then hopped out of bed to get ready. I'd already shown him my pure and mature sides. Today's image would be sporty and youthful. Maintaining an air of mystery was essential to keeping his attention. I didn't go overboard with a basketball outfit, opting instead for a sporty t-shirt and skirt. I put on subtle, natural makeup and tied my hair into a high ponytail. After checking the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like a college girl headed to gym class. Smooth skin, clear eyes, and an innocent expression. Yet, deep in my gaze was a glimmer that hinted at something far from innocent. I took a cab to the basketball court. It was packed after work hours, mostly with athletic college guys, shirtless and showing off their slick muscles in the humid air. My eyes couldn't help drifting over the rows of biceps. Damn, heaven on earth. Even in a crowd of towering athletes, Richard stood out. Today, he didn't have his usual slicked-back look. His dark hair was messily plastered to his sweaty forehead, and beneath it, his intense eyes gleamed. I couldn't help but let my gaze wander to the chiseled muscles flexing on his abdomen, his deep V-line disappearing into his shorts, drawing me in like an invitation to look closer. How did Natalie even deserve someone like this? I had to free Richard from her grip. My gaze must have been too obvious, because after sinking a three-pointer, Richard looked over and met my eyes directly. He smirked slightly, tossed the ball to his teammate, and walked over. Maybe it was the lack of heels this time, but as he stood before me, I could finally feel the weight of his presence. Casually, he lifted his shirt to wipe the sweat from his forehead, revealing his collarbone glistening under the harsh lights. "I left your shoe in my car. Let's go." I waved my hand. "No rush. Finish your game. I'd love to watch. It's been a while since I played." "You play?" Richard said, grabbing a water bottle and downing it, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. "Yeah, I was on the school team in college." I pulled my gaze from his neck and said the line I'd prepared. "But it's been ages since I last played." "Is that so?" Richard's interest was piqued. "Want to try?" I glanced around, feigning shyness. "There are so many people, I wouldn't even know where to start." Richard shrugged. "It's fine, there's a VIP court. Let's go there." After a slight hesitation, I nodded, following him with a basketball in hand. The VIP court cost $500 an hour, so it was often empty. We were the only ones there. As soon as we entered, I flicked my wrist and shot from the three-point line. The ball spun rapidly through the air, arcing gracefully and landing cleanly in the hoop. I had practiced this shot from this exact angle for 3 months. It was my trump card. Richard's eyes lit up with surprise. You really can play. Of course. I retrieved the ball, spinning it on my fingertips, then tossing it lightly to Richard. But it's been so long, I'm a bit out of practice. Total lie. I was a complete sports novice. I barely passed Tai Chi class in college, and that was after I barely scraped by with a 60. But with a bit of coaching, I'd mastered just enough to pull this off. Richard chuckled. I can do that too. He spun the ball on one finger, giving it a push with his other hand to make it spin faster. Impressed? He asked, with a glint of pride in his eye. He looked younger today, almost like a college kid himself. Gone was the stoic, powerful businessman. Instead, he was real, unguarded. This was a crucial step for me. He was letting me see a side of him few people did, which meant our bond was growing. Time to take it further. I slapped the ball from his hand, grinning. Defend against me. Me? Against you? Richard raised a dark eyebrow, amused. All right. He dropped into a defensive stance in front of me. Nervously, I reviewed the steps my coach had drilled into me. All I knew was a simple 3-step layup. Anything more complex, and my act would unravel. Counting silently, I started forward, 1 step, 2 steps. Richard playfully reached out, pretending to block my shot. I crashed right into him. The atmosphere changed in an instant. His muscles tensed, heat radiating through his clothes. A layer of sweat formed on my palms as our heartbeats echoed in the silence. He paused, momentarily stunned, and I took advantage of it to spin and shoot. The ball bounced off the backboard and fell neatly into the hoop. I turned to him, grinning victoriously. Well, what do you think? But he didn't answer, just stood there, staring at me. In the light, his eyes glistened, reflecting the joy on my face. After the game, we both felt it, a shift in our dynamic. We sat on the steps behind the basketball hoop, drinking water. Richard's entire body radiated warmth, a drop of sweat slipping down his jaw as he murmured, "Did you have dinner yet?" His voice held a hint of uncertainty, absent of his usual authority. This time, I didn't turn him down. Squinting, I replied, "Not yet. I know a great place." My treat. I took Richard to a mid to high-end barbecue restaurant, known for its lively, romantic atmosphere. Over dinner, we talked about basketball, our pets, and his experiences studying abroad. He was surprised to find we shared many similar interests. He found my conversation refreshing, and I let him take the lead, listening with bright eyes, always showing just enough curiosity but never overshadowing him. The more we talked, the more he shared, even letting slip a few juicy celebrity stories he'd heard firsthand. Surprisingly, beneath his cool exterior, Richard turned out to be quite the gossip enthusiast, which made me laugh genuinely. It was nearly closing time when the staff reminded us to wrap up. Richard held his glass, his cheeks faintly flushed, and chuckled as he looked at me. In the dim light, his eyes shone with the soft warmth of a tipsy glow, a far cry from the cold, distant man he was during the day. I couldn't help noticing the bright red of his lips and felt a jolt in my chest. This was dangerous. I gripped my glass tighter. I wasn't here for romance. Back home, I washed my face to shake off the tipsiness, then opened my computer to check Natalie's private account. Lately, her posts had taken a darker turn, often liking emotional support posts in the early hours. Clicking on one of these, I found it was a woman venting about her distant boyfriend, asking for advice. Natalie's comment was pinned to the top. My boyfriend's been distant too. I used to think he was just busy with work, but lately he barely talks to me, and he often doesn't respond to my messages. I ask, and he says he's busy. Are all men like this? The replies were relentless. You're probably being cheated on. Busy my ass. He can't spare a second to text. Dump him. Face it, when he's not with you, he's with someone else. Natalie didn't reply further, but later that night, she posted a picture of herself drinking alone. A hint of satisfaction flashed in my eyes. This was just the beginning. Richard hadn't broken up with her yet. Her family hadn't gone bankrupt, and she could still post her happy vlogs. But soon enough, that would change. I closed my laptop, staring out at the night sky as dark as ink. It was time to pay an old friend a visit. Chapter 7. Within days, our proposal for the garden project was officially submitted. The company initiated partnership negotiations with Penguin. As the deputy team leader, I naturally joined the meeting at Penguin Group. Normally, for a project of this scale, Richard would only need to be briefed for final approval. Such detailed discussions didn't require someone of his rank, but he came anyway. As he entered, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit and flanked by his colleagues, I noticed his gaze lingering on me. I knew he was here for me. The negotiations went smoothly. We had already submitted the proposal, so today's meeting was just a formality. When it concluded, Richard called out to me naturally, "Miss Lisa, I'd like to go over a few additional questions if you don't mind coming to my office." Everyone exchanged surprised glances, but Richard's face remained impassive, as though it were strictly business. I nodded, offering a polite smile. "Of course, Mr. He." Once we were alone in his office, Richard slumped onto the sofa, gesturing to the mini fridge. "Help yourself to a drink." I smiled, standing nearby. "Mr. He, you don't need any further clarification on the proposal?" Richard shot me a glance, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "The proposal is fine. What you should be thinking about is where we're going for dinner tonight." I sat down beside him, relaxing into the sofa. "Treat me to something good, will you? I haven't eaten all day." I sighed dramatically. "Your team has been intense. They required us here by 9. So I had to start prepping at 4 this morning. There's another meeting tomorrow." "Mr. He, couldn't you cut me some slack?" "Cut you some slack?" Richard leaned back on the sofa, his long legs sprawled, his voice dipping lower. "And what do I get in return for doing that?" I pretended to think for a moment before casually replying, "I could let you be the boss who bends the rules for me." Richard looked momentarily taken aback, then grinned, slightly caught off guard. "In that case, you can start by taking off my tie. It's strangling me." The glint in his eyes was half playful, half serious. Without hesitation, I leaned forward, reaching for his tie. The scent of his faint tobacco mixed with my own light aquatic perfume, creating a heady blend. I could feel his body tense as I moved closer, a faint blush appearing on his face. It was too close, this distance between us. Our encounters, though increasingly intimate, had still maintained a professional barrier. But this felt different, heightened by the fact that we were alone. Dressed sharply in business attire, my fingers traced along his tie, occasionally brushing the sensitive skin on his neck. Richard's Adam's apple bobbed slightly as his dark eyes grew deeper, our breaths intermingling. As I looked up, our gazes locked. In that split second, we both saw ourselves reflected in each other's eyes. Richard tore off his tie and pulled me into a fervent kiss. His kiss was as assertive and demanding as he was. Rational thought left me as I wrapped my arms around his neck, surrendering to the intensity of it. Just then, the door burst open, followed by a piercing scream. I was yanked away, and a stinging slap landed across my face. The slap was so forceful that my vision blurred momentarily. But beneath my hair, hidden from view, I allowed myself a small smile. Perfect. Natalie, clad in an expensive dress, her face flushed with fury, charged at me, ready to strike again. Her carefully composed features twisted into something grotesque as she spat venomously, words echoing those she'd once hurled at me in high school. "You slut! Are you some cheap whore selling yourself for men? You dirty tramp, I'll teach you some respect on behalf of your parents." These insults, so familiar from 10 years ago, had not changed. A spoiled princess, accustomed to having her way, as though being born into wealth gave her a free pass to inflict cruelty on others. But what if she no longer had that privilege? Tasting a metallic tang from my lips, I clutched my face, feigning fear and confusion, looking helplessly toward Richard. Richard seized Natalie by the arm, angrily pushing her aside. "Are you insane? This isn't the place for your tantrums." Natalie's face contorted with shock and anger as she pointed accusingly at me, shrieking, "Who is this tramp? Richard, how could you be with another woman behind my back? We're getting married in just a few months." Ignoring her, Richard helped me to my feet. I trembled slightly in his embrace, and seeing the blood on my lips made his expression darken. Clutching his sleeve, I whispered, my voice tinged with tears, "Richard, who is she?" Natalie, even more enraged, struggled against his grip, still hurling insults as she clawed at my hair and clothes. "I'm Richard's fiancée, you filthy tramp. I'll kill you." Before I could react, Richard shouted, "Get away!" He threw Natalie aside, breathing heavily, his gaze fixed on her with cold fury. "I'll talk to my family. We're canceling the engagement. We're not right for each other." "Cancel it?" Natalie's voice cracked, her face filled with disbelief. "Richard, are you insane? You're calling off the engagement over this woman? I won't allow it. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you." Without another word, Richard led me out of the office. Outside, the entire office was abuzz, staff stealing quick glances at us before hurriedly looking away. Though their curiosity was obvious, Richard led me to his car in the dimly lit parking garage, where we sat in silence. He gently touched my swollen cheek, his voice soft with concern. "That must have hurt." I pulled away, my voice barely a whisper. "You're engaged. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Richard hesitated, withdrawing his hand. "Sorry, I didn't mean to mislead you. My engagement with Natalie is purely for business. Nothing more. I never believed in love. Thought marriage was just a matter of convenience. But now," I murmured, glancing down. Richard turned, pulling me into his arms. I rested my head against his chest, hearing the strong, steady rhythm of his heart. His voice rumbled softly above me. "Now, I want to be with you, Lisa, for the first time. I feel that love is real." Richard's usually composed voice held an unusual gentleness, even a hint of vulnerability. "I like you." His words made my heart pound. Richard wasn't a passive heir. He was ambitious, talented, and at such a young age, had already shown remarkable capability. Once he set his sights on a true partnership, he would dismiss Natalie without hesitation. All he needed was time and a catalyst. I hadn't expected this opportunity to come so soon. Had Natalie shown even an ounce of humility earlier, things might not have escalated so drastically. But pride had been her undoing. She never realized that a man's protective instinct could be so powerful. Once a man feels compelled to protect a woman, love often follows. I owed Natalie a thank you for her foolishness in helping me cross the final hurdle. Holding back the surge of emotions, I choked out, "I won't be the other woman." Richard tightened his grip around my waist, his voice resolute. "I won't let you be the other woman. I'll handle this as soon as possible. Lisa, trust me." In the darkness, I clung to his shirt, nodding softly. Chapter 8. Natalie moved faster than I expected. By the afternoon of the next day, she had found my contact information and called to arrange a meeting. Her voice carried its usual disdain. "I suggest you make the smart choice. You don't want me causing a scene at your office, do you?" I agreed without protest and showed up at the cafe right on time. Natalie had already cleared the place out. She sat waiting, her gaze sweeping over me like I was something filthy. Without a word, she pulled a card from her purse and tossed it onto the table. "There's $2 million on this. Stay away from Richard. He's out of your league." I picked up the card under her haughty, self-satisfied gaze. "Since you took the money, you can." I interrupted her with a quiet laugh. $2 million? Is the Hahn family's financial situation that dire? I thought you'd at least try to buy me off with 5. I tossed the card back onto the table. "Is this a handout? Keep it to buy yourself something decent to wear." The innocent, timid expression I'd shown before was gone, replaced by a look of scorn. Natalie straightened, her face darkening. "So it was all an act. What do you want?" I raised my hand, examining my freshly manicured nails, and replied softly, "I want you to pay." Natalie looked confused, clearly not expecting my answer. Her brows furrowed. "What did you just say?" Leaning in close, I whispered into her ear, "Natalie, my real name isn't Lisa, it's Diana." A flicker of recognition crossed her face as she remembered. High school had been a long time ago, and I'd changed both my name and my appearance since then. She had no reason to connect me with the past. For a moment, she looked bewildered. Then her eyes widened in shock and fury as she recognized me. It's you! You slut! Always after other people's men, you little. Unable to contain her rage, she jumped up to slap me. I dropped my smile and caught her wrist, responding with 2 quick, sharp slaps to her face. The loud smacks stunned her, and for a moment, she just stared in shock. Then her forehead veins bulged as she let out a piercing scream and lunged at me. I caught a glimpse of a tall figure entering the cafe, so I let out a yelp and stumbled backward. And then I felt myself being wrapped in someone's arms. Richard's voice, barely controlled, rang out behind me. Natalie, are you out of your mind? Natalie froze. In her life, she had always bullied her way through, hurting others without consequence. She had never seen this side of me. She glared at me, her voice rising. Richard, she's faking it. She hit me first. Look at my face. Her thick foundation hid any real damage. And Richard scowled, unimpressed. I'll be talking to my father soon to cancel the engagement. Stop bothering Lisa. Tears sprang to Natalie's eyes as she tried to explain. It's true. This slut approached you to get back at me. Get back at you? For what? The words stuck in her throat. She couldn't admit to bullying me in high school. So she stammered. She stole my boyfriend back then. She's always been a tramp, always chasing after men. Richard, don't let her fool you. I watched her, now disheveled and red-faced, clutching my cheek and saying nothing as I stayed in Richard's arms. He frowned and said, You're beyond saving. Natalie, this is my last warning. Stay away from Lisa, or I'll cut off the loan to the Hahn family. With that, he guided me out of the cafe, leaving Natalie behind, raging and breaking things. Richard took me directly to his apartment. As we sat on the sofa, he held my hand, guilt etched on his face. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. Natalie's always been so arrogant. I should have foreseen this. I shook my head softly. It's all right. It turns out we were actually high school classmates. I just recognized her too. She's always been like this. It's not your fault. Richard hugged me tightly, his hand gently rubbing my back as he tried to comfort me. Give me a little more time. I'll take care of everything. His touch was warm, and after days of tension, I finally began to relax. I closed my eyes, feeling sleep take over. When I woke, night had fallen. I was lying in a large, 2-meter-wide bed, a soft down blanket covering me. Sitting up, I looked around. The room was spacious, tastefully decorated, with a massive floor-to-ceiling window offering a view of the neon-lit cityscape. The air was filled with Richard's scent. This had to be his bedroom. I got up and wandered around, stopping when I noticed a framed photo on his desk. It was a family portrait, showing a couple holding a small boy around 3 or 4. The boy's chubby face, dimples, and little teeth made him look like a plump, adorable dumpling. I chuckled, picking up the photo. I would never have guessed that Richard, the polished, ambitious CEO, had once looked like this. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Richard's arms wrapped around me from behind, and he rested his chin on my shoulder with a grin. You're awake. I made some porridge. Come have some. I set the photo back on the desk and followed him to the dining room. On the table, a bowl of steaming porridge sat under the warm light of the chandelier. I was taken aback. Richard had grown up in a world of wealth, living the life of a CEO. I had never imagined he'd cook. Dressed in a gray lounge set, his hair falling softly over his forehead, Richard smiled, a little embarrassed. This is my first attempt. I asked the housekeeper for tips. Hope it's okay. I looked down at the bowl, my heart stirring, as he watched me with eyes full of genuine affection. My once steadfast resolve wavered, a pang of guilt flickering through me. Richard truly cared for me. Natalie may have wronged me, but he was innocent. Using his feelings to avenge myself, how different was that from what Natalie had done to me? But I was so close to my goal. I couldn't give up now. My relationship with Richard progressed quickly. He was falling deeper into my trap with each date, every kiss, and every shared moment. I could see his affection for me growing by the day. He wasn't a typical playboy. Despite his wealth and charm, he was a straightforward, loyal man, and now he had become completely devoted. Yet, the more he cared, the greater my guilt grew. reaching its peak one day when I spotted a stack of documents on Han Enterprises in his study. Yes. From the beginning, it wasn't only Richard I was after. Penguin Group had granted Han Enterprises a substantial loan, but in business, such sums didn't come without a catch. Martin, he wouldn't have agreed to such a loan based on a marriage arrangement alone. Sure enough, Richard's study contained mountains of documents on Han Enterprises. While the most sensitive files weren't there, the records of embezzlement, fund misallocation, and illegal financing, these papers were enough to bring down the Han family. Richard and I were practically living together, and he trusted me completely even with his most private space. His study. Looking down at the thick stack of documents, I gripped them tightly, my knuckles turning pale. With these in hand, I could finally seek justice for my mother's death, my destroyed life, and all those years of darkness. Without her family's protection, Natalie would be left to ruin her own life, her reckless nature ensuring a miserable future. All my efforts had led to this moment, but I knew that taking these files meant the end of my relationship with Richard. A man as proud as he was would never forgive himself for falling in love with a liar. Despite everything, I had come to care for him. I stood there, clutching the documents, lost in thought, as night gradually settled outside. Chapter 9. When Richard returned home that night, the room was dark. I sat silently on the sofa, waiting. "Why's the light off?" he asked with a chuckle, reaching for the switch and walking toward me. Arms open to embrace me, our kitten scurried over, snatching one of his slippers and dashing away. I pushed him back, setting a thick file onto the table between us. Richard froze, glancing at the documents. His pupils dilated as he recognized what they were, but he didn't react with the shock I had expected. Instead, he tried to mask his emotions, moving closer to hug me, his voice trembling. "Lisa, what's for dinner? How about ribs?" Tears welled up as I forced myself to remain calm. "Richard, Natalie wasn't lying. I got close to you to get back at her." Richard's expression turned desperate as he tried to change the subject. "Forget ribs. How about something else? Did you feed the kitten yet?" "I'll go." As he started to leave, I grabbed his shirt, speaking firmly. "She ruined my family. I spent years planning, getting closer to you, just to bring her down." "Richard." He cut me off. "Stop it." Ignoring him, I continued. "I lied to you. I'm not who you think I am. I told you to stop." Richard's voice exploded in fury as he kicked the coffee table, sending it crashing onto the carpet with a thud. "You knew, didn't you?" My voice shook. "You're too smart to have been fooled by me all this time." Richard's eyes were red as he stepped toward me, torn between anger and sorrow. "Lisa, why did you have to say it? Why couldn't we just pretend everything was fine?" I looked down, letting my tears fall onto the carpet, darkening it in spots. "I love you," I whispered. "I can't keep lying to you anymore." His face went blank, and his hands clenched at his sides. After a long silence, he spoke quietly. "But, Lisa, now that you've said it all, how am I supposed to keep pretending with you?" I stayed silent, letting my tears fall. At that moment, I wanted to throw it all away, forget revenge, blame my own misfortune, and let Natalie go. Maybe I could figure out another way, find another way to get to the Han family, even infiltrate their company. Anything but this, anything to keep Richard. For so long, he'd been the one person who truly cared for me. Even when he sensed I wasn't exactly who I pretended to be, he hadn't put up any defenses, choosing instead to deceive himself just to keep us together. Richard said nothing more. His face was expressionless, but he looked like a wounded animal, utterly heartbroken. After a while, he finally spoke. "Go." I knew this was his verdict. We were over. I wiped my tears roughly, picked up my bag, and walked toward the door. As I opened it, something landed near my feet. Looking down, I saw the Han family files. Richard sat on the sofa, his head tilted back, one hand covering his eyes. He said nothing. In that moment, a wave of anguish washed over me, and I longed to run back to him, to hug him and tell him I didn't want revenge anymore, to beg for his forgiveness. But in the end, I simply wiped away my tears and left. Chapter 10. The plan went smoother than expected. The documents held far more incriminating details than I had anticipated. Martin, he had likely intended to devour the Han family's assets eventually, as he had secretly collected plenty of damning evidence. After submitting an official report, I uploaded the files online for public view. Within hours, the Han family was in chaos. Thomas Han had illegally raised over 5 billion yuan through various channels, using the money to patch up his failing business, pay off debts, and support his lifestyle. By the time authorities intervened, over 21,000 victims had incurred losses totaling 3.2 billion yuan. The Han family was finished. Thomas received a life sentence, unable to liquidate assets quickly enough. He had left Natalie and her mother penniless. Their home was seized, and with all the enemies they'd made over the years, their downfall was ruthless. Natalie's mother ended up in the hospital, and Natalie herself became a public enemy, constantly harassed by creditors who threatened her life if she didn't pay up. Finally, justice had been served, with everything settled. I went to visit my mother's grave, bringing her flowers. I spoke endlessly, telling her that I was finally doing well, that I had made something of myself, and that I had avenged her. I assured her she didn't need to worry about me anymore. But before I knew it, I was crying uncontrollably. Mom, you could have had a wonderful son-in-law, but I let him go. Life returned to normal. There was no longer a need to study Richard's preferences, no more nightmares haunting me each night, and no more plans to devise for revenge. Suddenly, I had all this free time. I should have felt relieved, joyful even. My revenge was complete, and I should be happy. But all I felt was emptiness. Waking at midnight, I often felt that someone should be lying beside me, with a little cat curled up nearby. Instead, I would stare at the ceiling until dawn, feeling hollow. Richard hadn't contacted me since then. A proud man like him wasn't one to get tangled up in romance. To him, I was nothing more than a passing chapter. He had returned to his life, and I frequently saw him on financial news, back in his role as a successful businessman, making deals and acquiring companies. He seemed to drift further and further from me, and at times, it felt as though our time together had been nothing more than a dream. Maybe we were never meant to be, just two people whose worlds had momentarily collided before resetting. I eventually quit my job, taking a long vacation and becoming a part-time travel blogger. Mountains, grasslands, forests, oceans. Being immersed in nature gave me a brief reprieve from my pain, a fleeting sense of peace. But at night, I still thought of Richard, thought of our time together. One evening, after posting a new vlog, I impulsively checked Richard's social media. He hadn't updated it in ages, yet I still found myself scrolling through his old posts, hoping to feel some lingering warmth from our time together. But today, there was a new post. Startled, I clicked on it, only to find a picture of a little white kitten. The caption read, "I'm no prince. I'm just a fool in love." My heart raced, and I stared at the screen, my mind blank. Then, suddenly, there was a knock at my door. I scrambled out of bed, not even bothering with my shoes. I was so rushed that I stubbed my toe on the cabinet, but I didn't care. I threw open the door. Outside, Richard stood, travel-worn, holding a suitcase. Seeing me, he lifted the silver high heel I'd left behind at his place, his expression one of resigned amusement. "One trick twice. Huh? Cinderella, you left your glass slipper at my place.